Welcome to Literacy Talks, the podcast for literacy leaders and champions everywhere, brought to you by Reading Horizons. Literacy Talks is the place to discover new ideas, trends, insights, and practical strategies for helping all learners reach reading proficiency. Our hosts are Stacy Hurst, a professor at Southern Utah University and Chief Academic Advisor for Reading Horizons. Donell Pons, a recognized expert and advocate in literacy, dyslexia, and special education. And Lindsay, an elementary classroom teacher, author, and speaker. Now, let's talk literacy.
Welcome to this episode of Literacy Talks. This is our recap of the Big Sky Literacy Summit, and we are going to turn the time right over to Lindsay to lead our discussion.
Okay, so first things first, this is for Donell. I thought the first thing we could talk about with Big Sky is the cookie, Donell. And if you guys listened to our episode a year ago with Big Sky, we also mentioned the cookie, which, Donell, any thoughts on that first?
Okay. Other than how embarrassing for me.
Do you remember the name of the company?
Okay, I should, because I went all over Bozeman trying to find this place.
Yeah.
It rhymes, doesn't it? I want to say it's like Ellie's Bellies or something.
Ell's Bells.
Ell's Bells. Okay.
That's it.
I was close.
That's it.
Yeah. Okay. And so I just thought it was funny. So we were sitting in a session and I get a text from Andrea Setmeyer. You guys might know who she is from the Reading League. And she was like, tell Donell to come up to the Reading League desk. You know, I have something for her. And Donell's sitting right next to me. So I'm like, Andrea just texted me. Like, what is this? And Donell was like, I bet it's a cookie.
And it was.
And she runs up to the desk and it was a cookie.
Andrea
right?
had literally commandeered the last cookie, the very last cookie. Let's write a story called The Last Cookie. And saved it for Donell. That was so nice of her.
Well, and Donell was so nice because she shared it with me because we were in the same session. So she went up and came back down and broke it in half. And we were like, this is the best cookie.
Yeah, that's not nothing for Donell to share it.
I know, right?
And Donell, you scored one more time during the conference. Do you want to share that?
Did I have another cookie?
Yes. We were at dinner. Do you remember? And we were talking about how much we loved the cookie that came in the bag. And someone next to us, he's like, there's a cookie in the bag. And like our chins drop. You don't know that there is like the best cookie. And he was like, well, I'll give it to you because I don't want my cookie. So he gave Donell another one.
Yes.
So I think the takeaway here is if you go next year to Big Sky and for whatever reason you're not eating your cookie, Donell, look for Donell. Give it to Donell. Also, part of the reason Andrea knew about Donell's propensity for these cookies is because Donell went into a very entertaining story about how she was looking to buy them in Bozeman.
Yes.
So Ell's Bells, I think you could make a lot of money if you just open the doors.
It's the almond extract, I tell you. It's yum.
It's so good.
They are very good.
All right. But seriously, we love this conference. This conference is interesting because I feel like it's really different. There's something different about this conference than other conferences. And one thing is that it's smaller. I mean, we just have 500 attendees, which is still, a big crowd. But compared to some of the other bigger ones we go to, it's much smaller. You run into the people, again and again several times. And I think, Dr. Nell Thompson, she does an amazing job running this. And I just think she is such an inspirational person. She's so passionate about literacy. She just radiates this kind of love and joy and passion. She's an SLP, so that is neat that she kind of brings that lens with her. And I just think she has such a beautiful spirit, and she just really emulates that. Like, you can really see that throughout the conference. And I love that the conference has a theme. So every year they do a theme, and this year was language is everything. That was the theme. And it's not just like a theme and then you don't refer back to it, but every session, everything would come back to language. And I assume Nell is the one kind of organizing and all these different topics and things, and just making sure that we're always coming back to that central idea, which is pretty special. And I think we're together a lot more than we're apart. So where some sessions, other conferences, I think you have lots of breakouts. This one, I feel like we even had less breakouts than last year, maybe. And we're just all together a lot, where we're having, speakers who speak to all of us. And then we might break out, but we come right back together. And I also, you guys tell me if you would agree with this, but I feel like this conference, so it really pushes your thinking. So I don't think this conference is the best for beginners. Maybe I think it's like a little more advanced. So if you feel like you're already pretty comfortable with what is the science of literacy, right? What is the science of reading? And you're ready to really have your thinking be kind of pushed and challenged and consider other things. That's kind of how I take it. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I definitely think this conference is perhaps some of the conversations are pretty elevated. And certainly when we come back together, you have some breakout sessions, we come back together. That's another unique feature of this conference, is that we will come back together. It's like a symposium setting. And we'll go out, we'll have breakout sessions, we'll come back, there'll be a panel discussion. And it just takes things deeper to another layer.
Yeah.
And a lot of this is research. It has a research base to it. And oftentimes it's information that might be unfamiliar to others. And we're also looking at studies and things and examining exactly why it works and getting into the nitty gritty. So it's not just a surface layer of things. And I think all of that, you're right, can be a lot. And the days are packed. We get up early and we're going until dinner time, and it's full. It's not just, here and there, and we're spending time in the hallways. You're sitting down and you're getting information, a lot of really good information. So I think it is a lot. And I think the information is very good. And you'll be hearing conversations between some of these researchers. And that's an elevated level, too, of information, is hearing them talking to each other, sharing information. All really good. In fact, I went back over my notes today and I'm thinking, oh, my goodness, there's so much here that I had written down. And I felt like I had taken it in and was utilizing a lot of it and thinking about it. And then today, looking at my notes, I thought, wow, there's still a lot more here.
Yeah. So let's start with sharing our favorite session. So Stacy, maybe I'll start with you, and you just share, what is one of the sessions that you just really enjoyed or got something out of?
You know what? I have to say I really liked them all. I'm sorry, that's a very first grade response. I liked everything. What was your favorite part about your school? Everything. I liked everything. Sessions that stood out to me. I really loved Margaret Goldberg's session. It was well designed, but also the message was very important. The implementation is key. And then also, I did appreciate the session with Louisa Moats, and that was about teacher knowledge. I just always love hearing from her. And so I thought that was impactful. Also important that she kind of came out of retirement. Maybe we shouldn't say that to the world, but that was the session she declared, how can I retire now? There's so many good things going on. So I did love, all the grand rounds were great too. I love being together and hearing the same thing. I really liked Julie Van Dyke's passion and her intellect and the things that she shared with us. Also, we got free journals in that one, literal physical journals. That was always good. So yeah, lots to stand out to me. I'm curious to hear about what yours were.
Donell, what about you? Did you have a favorite session?
Yeah, mine, I'm always going to say, and I've been talking about her quite a bit, is Dr. Julie Van Dyke. We've mentioned her before, and syntax is the big one there with Dr. Julie Van Dyke. And I've talked a little bit before about her being associated with and having this free online resource called Cascade Reader, which I use with my older students. And it breaks the text down and has it going down instead of across, and it has indentations based on syntax. And so it does a lot to help your student with comprehension. And I've talked about it for quite a while now. I think it's phenomenal. Getting to hear her, I think, is always, it just really elevates my thinking about comprehension in particular. And some of the things that she said this time around: comprehension is not a test score, a gist statement, a main idea. It's what occurs between the spaces. You just kind of noodle on that for a minute. She's saying a lot with that. Syntax is everything. Syntax is the glue that holds words together. Syntactic knowledge in the brain is fast. I thought those are some really great quotes from her session. And if you have an opportunity and you haven't been able to see her before, please do. And if you haven't checked out Cascade Reader, there's a lot there on the website that would be very informational too. But I just think what she's doing in terms of elevating our conversation about comprehension and syntax in particular, and its role in comprehension, is something that I haven't seen having been done before. And so for that, she stood out for me, even though, like Stacy said, there were so many fabulous presentations. But yeah, for me, she's always good.
Yeah, she was great. I didn't attend her breakout session, but she was part of the grand rounds, which you heard. I think Stacy mentioned that. And the grand rounds is just basically kind of think of a keynote, like we're just all together, but you're going boom, boom, boom. There's a few different speakers, one after the other, and their topics are, kind of aligned. Of course, we know it's all focused on language for this one. And I agree, Donell, in that she had said, was focusing on comprehension is a process. And I love it. She said it exists between the words. And I thought that was, I liked thinking of that, because sometimes you do think of it. And I've heard Nancy Hennessy say this too, because sometimes we think of it as a product, but it's a process. Comprehension is a process. So my favorite session, I had to just kind of say it was the last day, the very last day, Saturday, which they, I think, had kind of nicknamed that's your implementation day. For me, that was my favorite day of the conference. And that was, for me, the transformation day. They have what they call a transformation day, which was the first day of the conference. But for me, it was the last day was really transformational. I don't know. I was just really inspired. And maybe it's because it was all those days leading up to this last day. So I was really ready, to really dive better into language and really thinking about oral language in my classroom. But I had this, intentional, I just kind of this renewed resolve to really be more intentional about integrating language and reading and thinking more about how I do that in my classroom. And so a highlight of that last day is what I will nickname the quote unquote Old Girls Rock panel. And that is because Ann Kaiser, she was on the panel and she called herself, she's like, Old Girls Rock, she had said, because on the panel was Louisa Moats, Maggie Snolling, and Elsa Cardenas-Hagen. So I thought it was kind of funny that she used that term. I loved Louisa Moats was talking about teacher knowledge. She said teachers can't be innovators without knowledge. So we need that. And I just stand by her, where I just think it is so important that our teachers have this information. And Elsa kind of reiterated that. And then she was talking about, well, leaders need to be a part of this. And yes, we need to, our leaders need to have this information too. But she made the point that leaders change. Like, and you guys, if you're a teacher, you know, like how many times do we see a turnover in our principals or our district administration? And she said, teachers have to keep the work moving forward, even when leaders change. And so I thought that was an important point. And I loved when Elsa said, our teachers need courage to speak up. And you guys have heard me say that too, where I'm just such a proponent of the teachers really kind of leading and speaking up. So for me, that was my favorite session. So that day was amazing. And then I wanted to ask, do you guys have a favorite moment, like just a particular moment that happened? It could be in the conference. It could be outside of the conference, you know, like when you were doing something in the evening.
I have to say there were many awesome moments, but at the end of Dr. Cardenas-Hagen's talk, I thought that was a really powerful moment. And she said, she told us about how when she was younger and she got severely reprimanded, I'll say, because she was speaking, whenever she would speak in Spanish. And she ended her talk by saying, so no other kid has to go through that. I thought that was really powerful.
That was in fact, I wrote that down for my most powerful moment was, she said she got paddled at school every day. She spoke Spanish in school. She would get paddled. And it was heartbreaking. She, there were tears as she shared that with us. And as she said, do you want us here? Like how heartbreaking that, a child might feel that way. And really important, I think, for everyone to hear that, we need to embrace these students and their languages. And it's such an asset. And we've talked about that before on here, where if you know multiple languages, what a wonderful asset that is for you in your life. So I agree, like Stacy, that was just this really kind of heartbreaking moment. It was really powerful.
I thought the lead up to it was great too. Both she and Antonio Fierro spoke about their heritage and shared pictures of them when they were younger and a lot about the culture in their homes. And I felt like that whole session really helped me to remember how important it is to know the whole child and including their language, right? Which is such an important part of who we are. So it was really powerful. But if I had to choose a moment, it would be that moment that she ended her talk the way she did.
Yeah. Okay, Donell, how about you?
Yeah, for me, I think that we've all touched on, and it's probably going to be a part of the moment. Certainly Elsa speaking like she did, that was, if you didn't leave feeling changed, then I don't know who you are. And you certainly aren't an educator that I know. That changed you because you realize just how important a good educator is in the life of a student. And you can't not see that again. And you realize that these are people, despite all their accomplishments, it makes a huge difference how you are treated when you are a student in a classroom. It's a really vulnerable place to be. And we realized too, from the first day of having Dr. Bruce Perry talk about trauma and talking about the ways in which trauma can impact how we learn. and of course, it was very in depth, and I appreciated some of what he said. It was a little bit hard to follow sometimes because he didn't really have a through line. And so it seemed to jump around a bit. But if you were there to hang in for some of those pieces, they were very important. And then Elsa Cardenas-Hagen, obviously very powerful, and Dr. Tim Odegaard also sharing his personal story of dyslexia. I sat there at times thinking, when will things really be different? When will things really be different? How long have I been here? How many of these conferences have I attended? And I still walk into classrooms where things are not different. What will it take? That's what crossed my mind. And that was my moment, is thinking I had moments like that throughout this conference, which was phenomenal, with phenomenal people who have dedicated their entire lives to teaching, reading, correctly, appropriately, and meeting the needs of students because you're doing that. And asking myself, when will it be different for all students? When will this be the norm?
We wish it were yesterday, but it's
been a long time.
When will it? And what can we do to get that? So for me, my favorite moment, Stacy touched on this earlier, was when Dr. Louisa Moats said, "It's too early for me to retire." And she said, "There's so much work that needs to be done." And this was, I mentioned earlier, there was that panel she was on the last day with everyone, but there was also a breakout session that she was on along with like 5 others. And so, and that's when she had said, "I've learned it's too early for me to retire." And I thought it was interesting. She said that there's so many silly debates going on right now. And she specifically mentioned, the debates we have on syllables, the debates we have on sound walls. And she said that these debates are superficial. And she said what we should really be asking is, what does it take a teacher to understand the phonological system? And I thought that was interesting. But of everything she said, my favorite thing was that she said, "It's too early for me to retire," because I thought, yes, we need your voice. And I love, I just love hearing her every time she speaks. I'm like, what is she going to say? And I wish we had more time with her. Like, I wanted her just to have a session on her own and just talk for a whole hour, because I love listening to her.
I wrote down probably a lot of what she said, but you already mentioned one thing, Lindsay, and I wrote it down like this: teachers with knowledge know how to innovate in the moment. And I see the need for that all the time, even at the pre-service level, right? And then also, again, her focus has been on many things, but teacher knowledge has been really key for her. And she said, we need to rely on teacher knowledge when knowledge outpaces curriculum.
Yes. There's no perfect program or curriculum out there, right? And yes, we're usually kind of a little more on the forefront, like, okay, I know now, we know this, and even though my program says to do this, I need to know when to go off that script a little bit, right? And the program doesn't tell me what to do if something goes wrong. The child isn't getting the information or didn't learn it, or I need to do something different. So yeah, teacher knowledge is huge. And I love that you brought that up.
Educators and administrators know how important it is to close the gaps in foundational literacy skills for older learners. Reading Horizons Elevate is designed to help students in grades 4 through 12 and beyond master foundational skills they may have missed. By combining direct instruction with engaging age-appropriate software, Reading Horizons Elevate makes reading proficiency attainable for older learners. Helping students build a strong literacy foundation is key to unlocking success across all academic subjects. Visit readinghorizons.com/elevate to learn more.
Okay, was there anything that you heard at the conference that really pushed your thinking that you'd like to share?
You guys are going to be surprised by this, because we did talk about how uneven that transformation day with Dr. Perry was. It kind of was. He seemed to not quite know it, get his feet underneath him and know exactly what he was doing. It seemed that way anyway. Mm-hmm. And so it was a little disjointed. It was a little hard to follow. But I have to say, I have been really thinking about some of the things he said. And one of the quotes I had from him is just how much dysregulation can occur with students for various reasons, not just if they've had a traumatic experience, and it might not be a typical traumatic experience that you're thinking of. It can even be things like a hard adjustment with moving, an unexpected move, or something changes within a family. And you're thinking about how many of these things occur all the time for our students. And they're then in the classroom, and it impacts their learning. And no one ever talks about that. No one ever acknowledges the fact that I might be having a really difficult time right now. And maybe my 3rd grade year is going to be hard because of this reason. And we don't ever really acknowledge that. And anyway, I just thought that was really powerful. It was something I wasn't expecting to take away, I guess, in a way. But it's got me thinking about my own students and reevaluating perhaps some of the expectations I have.
Great. Okay, Stacy, what about you? Anything that pushed your thinking?
Yes, actually, it was during Dr. Charles Hume's. He was introducing his reading as language model, the real model, which I had the privilege of co-presenting with him before. I wouldn't say co-presenting, facilitating his presentation before. So I had learned of it. But in this particular moment, he said, after introducing the model to us, all models are wrong, but some models are useful. Yeah. And that really challenged my thinking because I rely a lot on some models, or I have really embraced some. And so it just made me think about the intent of the models, the development of a model, and the fact that he created a model and then he said all models are wrong. So that really pushed my thinking because I kind of just take him as gospel in a sense.
Yeah. That was really good, Stacy. I'd forgotten about that because he very clearly and systematically took you through what's good about the model and then where the shortcomings of a model can be. And we don't really ever do that. We don't acknowledge that, do we? It was really good.
It also inspired me to know the difference too between like Scarborough's reading rope that we all refer to so much is very useful in my opinion, but it's not a model. It's an infographic, right? So just even distinguishing things like that, I thought were important.
Yeah. And he went on to explain that all models are incomplete. And he is hoping that his is going to show a little bit more how the different components interrelate. And so in his model, and I don't know if it's online anywhere, I took a picture of the slide. So like maybe we can share that, but he had everything. So when he was talking about Scarborough's rope, he was saying he thinks it should start all together, be woven together as one rope at the beginning, then split apart into the strands and then come back together again. And that is because he's saying it all starts with language. So for his model, if you can, imagine on your very left side, you have language. That's where it starts, and that's birth. And he had these different ages. All right. So birth to pre-K was just language. Then it went to kindergarten to grade 1. And then that splits. And at the top is alphabetical skills, and below it is still language. Then it goes to grade 1 to 3, and you have word recognition on the top, language underneath, and there's arrows going back and forth between them. And then you go grade 3 to an adult, and it's reading fluency and knowledge of the world is under that. And then at the very right end, they come back together for reading comprehension. So it was, I enjoyed learning about his model. That pushed my thinking. It's the real RIL, the real model, reading is language model. And it was really kind of fun because he had us like doing choral responses, which I think is probably really new for him. But he was kind of joking. He was getting into it because that's, what a lot of the others were doing. So he would go, reading is language. And he'd have us, the whole 500 of us, like repeating that several times throughout his presentation, which was really great.
Yeah, he did say it was based on the simple view of reading, which was a helpful connection. And then I think the really powerful thing about his model is it's a causal developmental model. And so I think that's going to have a big impact on teaching as we go forward with it.
And I really appreciate folks like a Charles Hume, Maggie Snowling, and, they're married. I appreciated their humility. They're very quick to say, you know what, I used to think this, and now I don't think that anymore. I've been swayed to think this way. That's really useful, very helpful to see someone doing that out loud at a conference, right?
You know what? I'm so glad you brought that up because I really love the swag bag we get from this conference. And right now in this moment, you're probably going, what the heck does that have to do with anything? But the point is the journals that come in there, the note-taking things. And this is the second one I have now, but I kept my first one and I brought it with me. And I was looking back, and Louisa Moats in the last Big Sky conference I attended multiple times on a specific element would say, I'm rethinking that one.
Yeah,
I am re-examining my thinking about this. And I took note of that because I want to model that. I rethink things all the time, But it was very good to see that. I agree, Donell. Thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah, it's such a good example for all of us. Like, we're all going to be wrong sometimes, and our thinking and our knowledge evolves.
Yep. And expanding, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, constantly. So yeah, good. Okay, so something that I think at first you would think maybe this was going to push your thinking, and then like there was a session and then you're like, oh, okay, I know what she's saying. And I'm talking about Trina Spencer and Doug Peterson's session. And Trina was mostly giving the presentation and Doug would chime in, but she kind of led with, hey, people have these faulty beliefs. And she had these 3 myths. So, and when you hear the first one, I mean, just see your reaction. Like, as you guys are listening, the first myth she says is this, and this was on a slide, and I'm just reading her slide. It said, print concepts, phonological awareness, phonics, and fluency are foundational literacy skills. And she says that's a myth. Okay, so you're probably right away like, what? Those are foundational skills, right? Print concepts, phonological awareness, phonics, and fluency. But her point was that is language. That's the true one. And she chose to use the term pivotal for print concepts, phonological awareness, phonics, and fluency. See, those are pivotal skills, but the true foundational skill is language. So maybe not as like, alarming as maybe you'd think right away. Her next myth was reading comprehension instruction requires text. So that was the myth. Anyone want to explain what she meant by that?
Well, going back to the fact that it's language, right? You can talk about comprehension. You don't need to wait. And that one I think was less jarring. And Lindsay, you and I had a quick conversation as she went through these, but yeah, it was, it makes sense to me. We never say you can't teach comprehension until they know how to read, but she gave us very actionable information about that. So
yeah, I think a lot of us know, like, no, you can do all this through read aloud. And that really is the point. We can't like wait to worry about anything on the comprehension side until they're reading. Like, that would be ridiculous, right? When they first come in kindergarten, we are focusing on our, comprehending that, our language comprehension, right? And she had said spoken language could be as complex or more than written language too, was one of the points she was making there. And then her third myth was language is acquired naturally, so no explicit instruction is necessary. Even though, yes, a lot of language is learned implicitly, you do need some explicit instruction. Some students are going to need more than others. And of course, we've seen that. We've talked about that, especially students with a language disability, where they come in and they're, like, this has happened several times for me, where I'm teaching first grade, but they're speaking 2 or 3 word sentences. They're going to need more intentional language instruction. Or maybe they don't have a disability, but maybe you get someone in your classroom who is brand new to English. They're going to need more support as they're learning the English language. So there's lots of reasons. Even our students who seem to be speaking English fine can be, advantaged by having some explicit instruction and support. Let's take them to the next level, right? Let's help them grow their language. So I thought, she started at the beginning like, oh, here we have a lot of faulty beliefs, but then once you got into it, you're like, oh yeah, okay, I see what she's saying. All right. Did you hear anything that you want to point out that really resonated with you?
Boy, I think there were so many things that resonated. There wouldn't be enough time. But one thing that was really interesting was talking about, it was along that conversation of oral language. I believe it was in a group session because there was some conversation back and forth, but that in Doug Peterson, Charles Hume. And there was some back and forth conversation about parent training is effective for 2 to 5-year-olds to know what to do to improve oral language, yet it's no one's professional role to train parents. Teaching parents takes skill. However, there's no one in that role, which I thought was really interesting to come up with this gaping giant hole where we know that we could do a lot of good, be very effective to set some kids on a good path for language development. And there's nothing there for it. I thought that was interesting.
Ann Kaiser brought that up too. And the one thing I wrote down from her presentation was our power lies in parents.
Yeah.
And she any chance she got, she would bring that up. That is a gap in the system.
Yeah. Another resource, right, that we're not utilizing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I had written something down. Okay. So I loved the little journal they gave us too, that we could write notes in. And I would write my notes on the right side, and then like on the left side of the book, I would write my own little questions or notes or different things. I haven't done this method before. I really liked it. But yeah, one of the things I had written over to the side is like, how can I get my parents to better understand the importance of language? And I don't know that I have an answer to that, but it's just something that like I've been thinking about, because yes, she's talking about how important it is for our parents to know that and really think of all the language that is happening or not happening at home. What is, how can we best get parents to know that? I don't know. And I've had, parents concerned in my classroom when they have their child being pulled out for speech and language. They don't like that because they're like, well, they need to learn how to read. And I'm specifically thinking of a child who had was being seen for language with the SLP, not just speech. And I'm like, oh my gosh, but language is everything, right? That's the theme. So they need that language. It's going to support their reading and writing. So I'm just trying to think about how I can better let my parents know. And I mean, I'm thinking this is just going to be something I'm including in my weekly emails or something. And I think I want to share with parents somehow like the Strive for 5 framework in a very easy way. That's that conversation turn taking. I don't know. It's just something to think about, but I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, I actually thought about that systemically. When I taught first grade, I had monthly parent trainings for the parents of the students in my class. That's above and beyond, and there's no support for that, right? Like not every teacher has time to do that. I would love to see some type of support for that kind of a thing. And then also, I do have access, and I work with, I'm so grateful I get to work with early childhood settings and situations. And I had the same thought to offer that training, especially the Strive for 5, the book and the things that are in that. Can't recommend that enough. I think that's really palatable for parents as well. And so I love the idea too of weekly reminders, Lindsay. And Hugh Katz said this in his presentation. He said language is the mechanism of comprehension. Even when we talk to ourselves in our head, we use language, right? Like when we're thinking, it involves language. So even something that simple, helping parents to understand, might help them emphasize the need to develop that.
And what would have to go along with that is something Charles Hume also brought into the conversation. That was mandatory screening across the board for language, because then that alerts you. What does a parent do if they're doing height and weight check and they say, oh, the height doesn't look so good, what can we do? Or the weight, what can we do? Whether the child needs to gain weight or maybe we have too much weight, what do we do? A diet is talked about. But how does a parent know if we're not measuring oral language? And Charles said it's as much a public health concern as anything else we measure with height and weight. We also are looking for the benefit of this individual down the road and thinking this is going to impact their lives. So does oral language. It very impactful for the rest of their life. So that was a really interesting part of the conversation too.
Yeah. And Stacy, I've always been so impressed because I've heard you say that before, how when you used to teach, you did these monthly parent meetings. I'm like, oh my goodness, I don't think I could do that, but I guess # goals,
Well, maybe quarterly,
like once a semester, or maybe once a year is maybe I need to make that more achievable. But I'm thinking, gosh, I think I could at the end of my weekly email be like, start out, did you know? And then maybe like just a little tip, every time or something. Anyway, something to think about. I can't remember whose was that resonated with them. Was that Donell? Did you start that conversation about
I
the
can't
parents?
remember.
Yeah, I think you did. I think it was
Okay.
Donell that
So,
started
yes,
it.
Stacy, then something that really resonated with you.
Oh, shoot. I was like, yeah, that one. You know what? I went to a session that there were maybe 4 or 5 of us in, and I don't know, I can't find my notes, but I did take pictures and I was very engaged. But it was, this resonated with me because it was a situation where there was a very rural school in California that did not have even a full-time teacher at one point. Like, it was a parent volunteer teaching this multi-grade level class. They were very low in their reading ability. And so they came in and they tutored remotely these children as part of their school day. They delivered this instruction via Zoom. And the results were very promising. And I thought that was a great example. What resonated with me about that is that they did whatever it took, right? Like, and no, none of us would say Zoom is ideal, but they made it work and it was better than nothing. So those kids got what they needed and the gains they made were so impressive that it just, and I think that and having the conversation about parents and just the systemic nature of things, I felt like if we all had that approach, well, let's do whatever it takes, then we could come up with some really innovative ways to address needs, even if they're not in the moment ideal. But that was impressive to me. And that resonated in ways that I wasn't expecting, actually.
And I wrote something down that resonated with me. And it was Doug Peterson said it. And it was just so fast that I was like, gosh, did anyone else catch that? But I just thought it was so great. He said this, and I just think it can apply to a lot of our different situations. He said, "We are not in competition with each other. We are here to change the world." And I would just like love all of us just to adopt that as like a motto, because we have so many, we're in this space. We have so many different schools, teachers, companies. And like, I don't like when we like try to undermine or, sometimes adult egos just get in the way where, someone wants to be the best or they aren't going to recommend someone because that is threatening to them because they want to be at the top or whatever it is. I just think I love that. We're not in competition with each other. We're here to change the world. And that's what we're trying to do. We need to change the way our students are having access to this good. We need all students have access to this excellent evidence-based reading and writing instruction. And, I just wish more that everyone could unite under that. Does that make sense? So I don't know. Sometimes I just run into things or hear a story. And I just thought it was such a great point that he made.
That's the power of having these recaps, honestly, because I didn't catch that. Sure, I was there and heard him say it. But that's an important point that you make. And also for our listeners who weren't there, even more, it demonstrates that he meant it because he is an author, right, of Story Champs. And we had Charles and Maggie Hulme, who are the authors of Oxed. And they were both, like, their content is similar for similar purposes, right, based on oral language. And they both were presenting their research and rationale for their products. And I didn't sense it was competitive. It was definitely not, well, this is better than that because, or you should really be choosing this one or that one. I think all of those researchers would be happy to know it's being addressed no matter if it was either of those programs.
Yeah. Okay, my final question here, because we're about out of time, is just if there's anything else that stood out to you. And I will start with this. I'll start this one while you guys are thinking, because here's something that stood out for me. And that is I got to present. I was so excited to present at this conference. And I did a session on writing in early elementary, which is such a fun session. Like, I'm excited for that session just to be giving it more times throughout the year because writing instruction is something I'm really passionate about. But what happened is I had my everything. Everyone knows, like, anytime they're like, "Are you nervous?" And I'm like, "I'm always nervous for the tech." Okay. But I was in there. Donell made sure, right, that she's like, "I'll be your runner if you need someone." I'm like, "Nope, my slides are set. I'm ready to go." I took my little like selfie with me in front of my slides. Then people came in. I was about to start when the power went out. And I'm like, what? And at first I was really panicking until I realized like it was out throughout the resort. And I'm like, okay, it's not just me. And it came back on and then it went back off. And then kind of like some backup lights came on because we were in the auditorium. So it was really dark. So some backup lights came on, but my slides were no longer able to be up. For everyone. And so like we go out in the hall and we're kind of like, are we going? Are we waiting? At first we're going to wait for a few minutes. And then they're like, oh no, we don't know how long till the power is going to get back on. So just go. So I'm like, okay, but there's like, I don't have my slides. I mean, I had my slides, but no one could see them. And so I just like a first grade teacher, I'm like, everyone come down to the rug, come down and gather around my laptop. And I turned my laptop around and presented basically in the dark. And I just felt bad because my presentation is so visual, like with writing, you have writing samples and everything. But it was fine. And everyone was so nice. And it was really funny because afterwards Nell, I think it's Nell that said this afterwards. I thought it was really great. She said, when we came back together after, she said, even though it was dark, we got enlightened. And I'm like, I love that. But like literally as soon as my presentation was done, the power came back. I was like, oh, that's great. That's just my luck. And then I was at dinner that night with a few others that were speaking the same time as me. And we were all joking, like, we need t-shirts that say like, I presented during the Big Sky blackout, or something. So anyway, that was kind of a funny moment that really stood out to me. Was there anything that happened at the conference or anything else that you guys want to mention that stood out to you?
Lindsay, I do just have to say you were true. And in my head, I'm thinking to myself, I am so glad I know not for you, for your sake, that you happen to be one of those presenters, because I knew you would just pick up and go on. You would make it happen. So I thought it's in the most capable hands for this situation. I'm so sorry it had to happen to you. But if it's going to happen to anyone, it's got to be someone who knows exactly how to pick up and carry on, which was just so great for you. And like we said after, wouldn't you know, I mean, you were so prepared. And then you walk in and boom. And that's the one thing you have no control over.
I know. So sad.
One of the things that stood out to me, just to say it over again, if we haven't heard it enough, and something that we heard a lot, was oral language, oral language, oral language, and reading is language. All of those phrases. So it's just expanding. Maybe if that's expanding your viewpoint of what you think of when you think of reading, maybe that's where the beginning is for you. Maybe that's something that pushes on that and says, oh, that's more than I thought about.
You know what? In the session we were in with Louisa Moats Lindsay, the breakout session, when she came out of retirement, maybe we should just keep stating that so she doesn't forget.
Don't say that for her sake.
She won't hear this episode, but in case she does, welcome back. we missed you. No, but I loved that the question was, so what? Now what? What are you going to do based on what you've learned to change your practice? And that's when she said she was coming out of retirement. That's what she was going to do as a result of the things we were focusing on in the conference. So I also loved that that stood out. Dr. Elsa Cardenas-Hagen, who said in her talk as well, the true change is to make better your current environment. So kind of shrinking the change too, so it's not so overwhelming. But I have added to a lesson plan that I use with my students a language objective. That's one small change that I'm going to make. And, I hope to make many more. But I hope that helps my pre-service teachers know how important that is. Donell, Lindsay, did you have anything that you were talking, Lindsay, about how You're going to address this with your parents. Anything else you're going to implement as a result?
Yeah. Oh, putting me on the spot.
Sorry.
No, it's good. Like we are just in the second week of school as we're recording this. So we just started, and I'm trying to be so much more, I guess, intentional with ways to add in language, lots of turn and talks, trying to be better about giving each partner a job, like Anita Archer says, because that's something I'm never very good at. I always just like turn and talk to your partner, but I'm trying to be like, partner one, do this, partner two, do this, say this, or whatever. And I was talking to my students last week about like you also need to show your partner you're listening, and how can we show them that we're listening? And so I'm thinking a lot about how to fit that more in. And during like my close reading part of the day, really thinking about how language is the driver there and what I can be embedding with language. And so that's just kind of what I've been thinking about. Next year, the Big Sky Conference will be August 26th through 29th. They announced that. I'm a little sad I won't be able to be there next year because that's when our school year will have started, and it's too hard for me to miss at the beginning of the year. But for any listeners, that's when it will be. Donell, did you have anything else you wanted to share?
No, all of it's fantastic, and amen to everything everybody has said. And it gave me, kind of revitalized me into thinking I need to get back in there and stay involved in scaling up excellent reading instruction for all students and be a part of that.
Okay.
And reading is language.
Reading is language.
Yeah. And I would add to that, like, if you can make it next year, then it is well worth it. The one thing that I think, well, not the one thing, one of the things that I think Dr. Nell, as people refer to her as, does really well is creating this sense of home. Because the place that conference is in, we've spent very little time talking about that. It's amazing. If you live at low altitude, be prepared to adjust. But it's beautiful. And I think of it as summer camp. It's like you're at summer camp, only you're learning things all the time. And even when the lights went out. In fact, in that moment, it was very summer campy. But yeah, I love the whole vibe, as the kids say. But it was really great. So I appreciated being there with the both of you. This is the first time we've all three been to that conference at the same time. So that was fun. And I really have appreciated this conversation. So thank you, Lindsay, for leading it. And thank you to those of you who've tuned in to hear about Big Sky. Talk to your friends who went. I'm sure they'll have other great things to add. And we hope that you'll join us for our next episode of Literacy Talks.
Thanks for joining us today. Literacy Talks comes to you from Reading Horizons, where literacy momentum begins. Visit readinghorizons.com/literacy talks to access episodes and resources to support your journey in the science of reading.